Number 7. The Unpaid Bodyguard. You think choosing an outfit is hard. Imagine your favorite jacket was also your bodyguard, and it was alive. And it had thousands of tiny stinging harpoons ready to fire at anything that looked at you funny, and you couldn't take it off. Ever. Welcome to the life of the decorator crab. These crabs are the masters of functional fashion, but their sense of style is less Gucci and more hostile takeover. Their survival strategy is to basically glue other living creatures to their own shells for camouflage and defense. The most popular accessory, the sea anemone. Anemones are those beautiful flowery-looking blobs that are armed to the teeth with stinging cells called nematocysts. To a predator, a crab covered in anemones looks less like a tasty meal and more like a walking box of pain. So, the crab gets a living shield, a walking weapon system that deters pretty much everything. But what does the anemone get out of this deal? Well, it gets a free ride around the ocean floor, which is nice. It might snag a few leftover food particles that the crab misses. It's like being someone's chauffeur, but instead of getting paid, you just get to eat the crumbs they drop on the floor of the car. The crab will literally pick up an anemone, carefully snip it to the right size if needed, and then stick it onto its back like a living piece of Velcro. The anemone has absolutely zero say in this arrangement. It's just sitting there, minding its own business, when suddenly a giant claw yanks it from its home and turns it into a hood ornament. It's less of a friendship and more of an abduction for the sake of home security. Number 6. The Mob Boss and his Sugar Farm. Imagine your favorite drink came from a tiny, defenseless bug, and to make sure your supply never ran out, you decided to become its protector, its guardian, its mob boss. That's the bizarre relationship between certain species of ants and aphids. Aphids are basically nature's little juice boxes. They spend their days sucking sap from plants, and because this sap is low in protein but high in sugar, they have to process a ton of it. The excess is expelled from their rear ends as a sweet, sticky substance called honeydew, and ants are utterly addicted to it. They love this stuff more than you love coffee on a Monday morning. So, the ants have set up a deal. In exchange for unlimited access to this sugary gold, the ants will protect the aphids from predators like ladybugs. They'll patrol the plant stem like tiny six-legged bodyguards, aggressively taking down anything that tries to mess with their personal soda fountains. Sounds like a fair trade, right? A classic symbiotic friendship. Except, it's not. The ants aren't just protectors. They're wardens. They will actively manage their aphid livestock. If an aphid has wings and looks like it might fly away to find a new plant, the ants have been known to chew the wings right off. They essentially crippled their friends to ensure they can't escape. They keep them docile by stroking them with their antennae, which stimulates honeydew production. It's a full-blown protection racket. The aphid gets to live another day, but only as long as it keeps producing the goods and never, ever tries to leave the farm. Number 5. The worst roommate ever. Everyone has a bad roommate story. They leave dishes in the sink, play music too loud, maybe they're late with the rent. But have you ever had a roommate who decided the best place to live was inside your body, specifically, via the back door? Meet the pearlfish, the undisputed champion of violating personal space. Its unwilling landlord is the sea cucumber, a creature that already has it rough, being a squishy, slow-moving sausage at the bottom of the ocean. The sea cucumber has an orifice it uses for, well, pretty much everything. Breathing, waste, disposal, you name it. To the pearlfish, this multi-purpose opening isn't a private exit. It's a front door with a welcome mat. This slender, snake-like fish waits for the sea cucumber to take a breath, and then makes a beeline straight inside, setting up shop in the respiratory system or digestive tract. The sea cucumber gets absolutely nothing out of this arrangement. Zero. There is no benefit. It's like a stranger breaking into your apartment, deciding to live in your bathroom, and you're just supposed to be okay with it, but it gets so much worse. Some species of pearlfish aren't content with just a free, warm, and relatively safe place to crash. They get hungry, and instead of going out to get food, they just start eating their host from the inside out, often targeting the gonads. This isn't a friendship. This isn't symbiosis. It's a home invasion that turns into cannibalism. The sea cucumber's only real defense is to violently expel its own internal organs in a desperate attempt to evict the freeloader. It's the biological equivalent of burning your own house down just to get rid of a bad roommate. Number 4. The anxious lookout and her blind landlord. How much do you trust your friends? Enough to let one of them be your eyes. What if your life depended on their vigilance? Every single second of every single day. That's the high-stress codependent friendship between the pistol shrimp and the goby fish. The pistol shrimp is a phenomenal architect but is almost completely blind. It spends its days digging and maintaining a pristine burrow in the sand, a perfect little bunker to hide from the chaos of the ocean. The goby fish, on the other hand, has fantastic eyesight but is homeless and terrible at construction. You can see where this is going. They move in together, the shrimp does all the housework, and the goby pays its rent by being a living security camera. Here's where it gets weirdly personal. The shrimp and the goby are almost never not touching. The shrimp keeps one of its long, sensitive antennae resting on the goby's body at all times. This is its lifeline to the visual world. If a predator approaches, the goby makes a specific subtle flick with its tail fin, and in a flash, both of them shoot back into the safety of the burrow. The goby is the panic button, and the shrimp has its finger on it 24/7. So, is it friendship? Or is it a job with the most intense pressure imaginable? The goby gets a free custom-built home, but it can never clock out. It can never get distracted. Its entire existence is dedicated to watching for shadows, because if it messes up, they both become an appetizer. It's a beautiful partnership. If your idea of friendship involves being physically leashed to your landlord and living with the constant, crushing anxiety that one mistake means you both die. Number 3. The adopted murder baby. Parenting is tough. You pour all your time, energy, and resources into raising your kid, hoping they turn out okay. Now, imagine doing all that, only to find out the child you've been lovingly feeding isn't yours, and that it murdered your actual children the day it was born. Meet the common cuckoo, nature's most successful and horrifying freeloader. The mother cuckoo is a master of infiltration. She doesn't bother with the hassle of building a nest or raising her own young. Instead, she finds the nest of a much smaller bird, like a tiny reed warbler. When the parents are away, she swoops in, removes one of their eggs, and lays her own in its place in a matter of seconds. Her egg is often a brilliant forgery, perfectly mimicking the size and color of the host's eggs. The warbler parents come back, count their eggs, and suspect nothing. But the deception is just getting started. The cuckoo egg is rigged to hatch faster than the others. And the moment this naked, blind, alien-looking chick emerges, it is driven by one of the most brutal instincts in all of nature. It will systematically maneuver itself underneath the other eggs or even its newly hatched biological siblings and, with surprising strength, heave them over the side of the nest, sending them plummeting to their deaths. The host's parents return, completely oblivious to the massacre. Their brains are hardwired by evolution. See a gaping mouth in the nest, stuff it with food, and the cuckoo chick has a mouth that is comically huge and bright red, a supernormal stimulus they simply can't ignore. So they spend the next few weeks working themselves to exhaustion, feeding a gigantic imposter that has grown many times their own size, all while their own genetic legacy lies dead on the ground below. It's nature's most heartbreaking case of identity fraud. Number 2. The living prosthetic. Your tongue is pretty useful, right? Tasting, talking, keeping food from falling out of your mouth. It's a core part of you. Now imagine it was an uninvited guest who broke in, killed the original owner, and took their place for some deeply unlucky fish. That's not a horror movie plot. It's just life. The perpetrator is a parasitic isopod Simathoa exigua, better known as the tongue-eating louse. This thing is a walking, swimming nightmare. It enters a fish through its gills, a stealthy home invasion. It then crawls into the fish's mouth and finds its target, the tongue. It latches onto the base with its 7 pairs of sharp, grasping legs and gets to work. It doesn't nibble, it doesn't chew, it severs the blood vessels. Deprived of blood, the fish's tongue begins to atrophy. It withers, dies, and eventually falls right off. But the louse doesn't leave. The eviction is the entire point. In the most profoundly disturbing act of biological replacement, the parasite attaches its own body to the stub of the muscle left behind. It becomes the new, fully functional tongue. The fish is now forced to use a living crustacean as a prosthetic just to move food around in its own mouth. This isn't a temporary stay. This is a lifelong commitment. The louse feeds on the fish's blood or mucus, thriving in its new role. The fish is a permanent hostage to its own anatomy, its body mutilated and repurposed by an invader. It is the only known case in nature where a parasite functionally replaces an entire organ of its host. It's not a friendship. It's a hostile, surgical takeover with a 100% success rate. Number 1. The zombie puppet master. We've seen kidnappers, mob bosses, murderers, and body snatchers, but the top spot on our list isn't just about holding an animal hostage. It's about stealing its mind. It's about erasing its identity and turning its body into a remote-controlled vehicle for a sinister purpose. This is the story of the Ophiocordyceps fungus. The victim is typically an ant, just going about its day, serving its colony. Then, a single microscopic spore lands on it. The spore burrows through the ant's exoskeleton and begins to spread a network of fungal cells, called mycelia, throughout its body. It consumes the ant from the inside, replacing its non-vital tissues with its own. But it doesn't kill the ant, not yet. The real horror is what it does to the brain. The fungus hijacks the ant's central nervous system. It releases a cocktail of chemicals that seizes control, forcing the ant to abandon its colony, its instincts, and its entire purpose. The ant is no longer in control. It begins to climb. It is compelled by an unseen force to ascend a plant stem to a very specific height, one with the perfect temperature and humidity for what comes next. Once it reaches the designated spot, the fungus forces the ant to perform its final act. It clamps its mandibles onto the underside of a leaf in a death grip, a lock so powerful it cannot be released, even after death. Only then, with its puppet secured in the perfect position, does the fungus deliver the killing blow. A few days later, a long, slender stalk erupts from the back of the dead ant's head. This stalk is the fungus's fruiting body, and it releases a deadly shower of new spores onto the unsuspecting ant trails below, starting the entire nightmare all over again. The ant isn't a friend, it's not even a host. It's a self-delivering weapon system, a zombie puppet whose final, involuntary act is to doom its own kind. That's it for today. I've got more videos like this coming soon, so make sure to subscribe and stay tuned.